what's wrong with medicine is they one size fits all. You're on a robotic conveyor belt and everybody gets the same thing. Well, that's impossible. There's no one thing for everybody.
I'm Ann Marie McQueen, journalist and proud 50-ish woman, and we are here looking for the true truth in perimenopause, menopause, midlife, and beyond.
Opening our minds to other possibilities is not always easy.
Hot flash ink.
You're all woman to me. All right, Ann Marie.
Anyone who listens to the Hot Flash 8 podcast will know I've had a hard time finding help with my perimenopause and menopause symptoms, whether it was trouble sleeping or extreme anxiety or vagina stuff. I've encountered roadblock after roadblock in doctors who didn't know anything about taking care of women like me. It made everything harder than it had to be. That's why I'm so happy that there are companies like MidiHealth stepping into the gap and sponsoring podcasts like this one. Their supportive, comprehensive, and holistic approach to the menopause transition will provide you with what we all need most, a personalized care plan. Their virtual care clinic is easy to use and covered by most insurance plans. You can chat with your specialist during an appointment or message 24/7. You don't have to deal with this alone any longer. Book your visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. I'm just really interested to talk to you about someone who's a cancer specialist, to talk about prevention and some of the confusion that's going on with hormone therapy, because it's very hard to find those people. So a lot of people talking about hormone therapy and cancer who don't seem to be specialists.
Yeah, we need to talk about prevention.
Yeah.
This is the key thing, because in cancer in general, I mean, breast cancers, as you know, number one, breast cancer. And so, but our system is so reactive and not proactive, not preventive, not precise, not personalized. And obviously, if our medical system is working, why do we see just an, outrageous array of diseases in every age group? Because autism is, 1 in 37. Our children have 60% have one or more chronic diseases. And the teenagers have anxiety, depression, suicide. We have children starting their period very early now, and puberty starting at much earlier ages. I have all these 30-year-olds with breast cancer or some, brain cancers, some kind of cancer. And I started ringing the alarm. Well, I've been ringing the alarm for probably, 10 plus years. And I said, okay, wait, how can there be this much disease and illness and cancer? Well, now it's exponentially worse. So I've been saying 911 for a while. And I tell people, the cure for cancer is prevention. And I say that in all my lectures. But in the medical field, we're not talking about prevention. We're not talking about how do we restore your health and, get you on your way. And so that is the biggest problem. I would say the biggest problem is that. And then also we've got to create healthy mothers. And then we have to start with there. Have to start with the right receptacle for this miracle that you're going to be growing. And then teach the child from birth on emotional, physical, intellectual, spiritual level, how to live. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it, that's where it starts. I've had children, and, I was so conscious about how I was going to raise the children and the entire environment that I was going to create. And now more than ever, because we're living in the great poisoning, the mother's downloading so many toxins that the interplay is Googleplex of possibilities.
Okay.
And so we all together need to say, wait, this cannot go on. We're spending $4.3 trillion on healthcare, soon to be 5.1, but no one's healthy. And so how can that be? Okay, cancer rates are 1 in 2 people now. It's the number one killer, 1 to 85. And there's no progress really in cancer. And we haven't cured one chronic degenerative disease in the last 100 years. But we have all of these charities, all these fundraisers, all this, and the anguish and agony people go through when they have cancer. I hear it every day. I had a new patient yesterday from Florida, and she's been diagnosed with endometrial cancer. And so she had a hysterectomy, and her pathology was favorable, that she didn't have any lymph nodes or anything. And she goes, I told the doctor, I'm not doing chemo and radiation. And so she said, I got a secondary consult, and they said the same thing. And so I said to her, so why do you have such, absolute desire of not doing chemo and radiation? She goes, well, my daughter had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and she had back pain for a very long time. No one was listening to her. She didn't get properly diagnosed, which is what I hear a lot of the time. And because they think you're young, you don't have any problems, right? Well, you can't think like that now anymore. And so you have to get to the bottom of it within 2 to 4 weeks of a patient coming in. You need to figure it out. If a patient doesn't get better, you need to figure it out. And so anyway, she said, my daughter got through chemo, did all the chemo. She got weaker. They had her on fentanyl. Then they did CAR T, which is a new advanced treatment of basically taking your immune system out and putting a new immune system. And she died in 10 minutes. So I don't want to go through what I saw. So I said, I totally understand. I said, but I will tell you, I have to get some information from you, meaning blood work and special testing that I do to figure out. And I said, we will figure this out. And I will decide if you need to do an alternative to chemotherapy, maybe some fractionated low dose chemo because you're 70. But I want you to know as much as I can figure out so you can make the best educated decision. And so because people do come to me for second opinions, and they'll say, Dr. Keeling, I really don't want to do chemotherapy. And I get that. I understand that. But at the same time, this is your life, and I'm going to make the best educated decision. And when we give chemotherapy, we have this protective measures, and we're not just doing chemotherapy. Chemotherapy is just one avenue of healing. I've got to take care of all the other aspects of healing. You can't just rely on chemotherapy because it's cancer cells have chemo resistance and chemosensitivity. So what about the guys that don't respond to chemo? So you better go after them with the natural things, maybe repurposed drugs like fenbendazole and vermectin and metformin and Celebrex and dibaratimol, all these other drugs that have anti-cancer activity, natural things, curcumin, agaricus blase, all these other things that have anti-cancer ability. So you can't put all your eggs in just the chemotherapy, but also more importantly, when you take care of a cancer patient, if they have to have chemotherapy, what's happening to their immune system? That's how you fight the cancer. So you've got to take care of their immune system while they're doing chemotherapy. And this is not addressed in any cancer patient with a doctor. Okay. And so you're not only killing cancer cells, you're killing the normal cells, and you're destroying every physiological system in the human body, because that is what chemo does. So our job is to protect and preserve the patient while they get chemotherapy. And so that's what we do differently. And not all of our patients need chemotherapy. When they do, and when they have, if I have very, very serious patients, I may recommend the conventional, but I have them do 100 other things to protect themselves so that they don't get destroyed in the process, and they have the highest cancer killing possibilities with what they're doing, plus all the preserving of the human, frame, correct? And so, our medical system is unfortunately very broken, and that's why we're in an upheaval of patients really wanting a different way. 100 years ago, doctors didn't have any drugs. And so they had to do natural things. They had to do mortar and pestle and make compounding and stuff. And so there's a lot of old things that we need to be using, today, right? We got all that was replaced by the patented pharmaceutical. And so we have to go back to our roots, and then we've got to go back to what is going on with the garden or the terrain of the cell. And why is your body making cancer? Okay.
Yeah.
What is your stress? Like the patient I was just telling you about yesterday, she has endometrial cancer and had a successful surgery. And so I said, I went through her life from 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 30, 40, et cetera. And she told me that when she, several years ago, she was in she was being kidnapped. And she and her daughter were kidnapped because her husband was a banker, and they came to basically rob them. And they put her in the trunk and her daughter for 4 hours. And so she recounts this incredible experience, okay? And she recounted it as a near-death experience. And so anyway, it was very fascinating. And she goes, I've been holding on to this. And I have done hypnotherapy. I wrote a book about it. I processed it, but I don't think that I have reframed this unfortunate, experience into a favorable experience in my body. Because I don't know if you've read Your Body Keeps Score or The Emotion Code. These books talk about how our body keeps track of everything. And we just have to all learn how we're all going to have detours and, curveballs in our life. And life is not always going to present itself with perfection. And so we have to be prepared. How do we emotionally, mentally, physically handle these very unfavorable experiences that we have in our life? We have to reframe them into a favorable experience. Okay. And that's not easy to do, and that's why we always recommend that patients, do the emotional work that we recommend. Like I tell them, there's no shortcut to healing. It is a 24/7, it's a marathon. And I always tell people, today we're living in 2024. It's not you're so bad, but what's around us isn't so good. Mm-hmm. So everybody thinks they're living in their own, I do this, this, and this, and I'm telling them, yes, you do, but you're also living in and of this world. And, air pollution, water pollution, food pollution, stress pollution, all these things, have to be taken into consideration. And so and then EMF pollution. So we've got to take all this into consideration and try to create the best self-care program that you can. And that's what I do, because I tell people self-care is the new healthcare. Going to an emergency room, they're going to just make sure you're not going to die. Okay. Yeah. If you go to the hospital, they're just going to treat you to get you out, but you got to still go home and do the self-care that you need to do to get out of that. Yeah. And you really want to try to avoid ERs and hospitals. Those aren't a place of healing. Okay. Now that's probably going to change in the future, because there are intentions out there now to make integrative hospitals, okay, that are going to have healing and Reiki and lymphatic drainage and all the things that we know work. But that doesn't exist right this second. But I know that I hear that is going to happen. So we just have to take, all of us have to take a proactive. And we got to work together. We got to work cooperatively and collaboratively, and that's what doctors, they want to work in this box. Well, we can't work in a little box. We got to work in the world box, And that's what I try to do. And every individual is an original. No two people are the same. And so we know that from identical twin studies. If you look at the retrospective analysis of identical twins, what they eat and their lifestyle, which lifestyle is many things, as you know, is what would predispose them to having a disease or not having it.
I'm curious what you do about EMFs, because that's like tinfoil hat conspiracy theory stuff, but you're seeing more and more companies coming out with clothing, like Faraday clothing, and pendants and devices by your computer and plants. Like, how much of a concern is that for you? And what do you do?
I would say it's the number one concern.
Really?
Yeah. And the reason why I say that, okay, so, I didn't grow up in EMFs, right? Okay. And I mean, I'm, older. And so, we didn't have EMFs, and EMF started about really heavy duty. It started, 30 years ago, but about 15 years ago, it's exponential. And now we're living in an electrical field. Okay. And if you look at EKG of your heart, it's an electrical rhythm, right? If you look at an EEG of your head, it's an electrical rhythm. If you look at your nervous system, it's electrical, everything. Your acupuncture meridians are electrical points. And so we are a bioenergetic, we're a biophysical and biochemical and bioemotional being. And so we have to make sure all of that is working to serve you every day. And so EMFs are abnormal electrical. It's like how do you think your phone, you call someone, there's a signal. Okay. There's a frequency, just like music is frequency. Okay. And so we are now between, all the EMFs in, everybody's computer, iPad, cell phone, tower, satellite, etc. We're all in electrical field. And yes, you can wear EMF protective clothing. I know a lot of people do. I personally, in my house, turn off the electricity to my bedroom, and I sleep in a Faraday cage, because your sleep is your most restorative time. So I have it's a canopy that sits over my bed. And then I do something called the biomodulator. The biomodulator is a device that basically gets you an electrical rhythm. It was designed by a physician called Jerry Tennant. Jerry Tennant wrote the book, Energy is Voltage. And so it is a way of basically charging your body to have the correct frequencies and to balance your body, because we all have the potential to be lacking voltage. Voltage is the energy of your cell. Every cell has voltage. So you should be about minus 25. And so we measure that in the patients. And then if you've had what takes away your voltage is surgery, tattoos, toxins, bugs, teeth, all these things, all these things take away your voltage. Okay.
Teeth?
So
What do you
your
mean
voltage,
teeth? What do you mean teeth? Getting
teeth, like root canals,
Root canals, yeah.
and infections and fillings and all of that are, can take away your voltage. And so anyway, so you've got to remove all those interruptions, in what's going on. And so that is for me, a good way, because I've had surgeries and I've had all my scars fixed. So once you have a scar, it blocks all the acupuncture meridians going back and forth. So you need to reestablish those connections. So that's called neural therapy. And so we do that on every single patient. So but then you've got to go about removing all the things that are blocking you. So parasites, viruses, bacteria. One of the biggest things in cancer patients is fungus, the connection of fungus and cancer, because why? It's an inflammatory process. Okay. And so you've got to remove all the things that are causing you problems. That's why grounding on the Earth's magnetic field is the best thing you can do every day. That's the thing that doesn't cost any money, and you can do it. You got to do it on, grass or sand or dirt, sitting under a tree, something like that. Getting sunshine every day is also very important. So doing these things is vitally important to your existence today. Yeah. And so I always think every day, okay, and I always do such a very deep exam, meaning when I say exam, not just physical exam, but I go through a person's life. And I always okay, what is going on here? What is the perfect storm that created this? And so, if you really, really analyze people's lives, just asking them how many times in their life they've taken antibiotics, Okay, because what do antibiotics do? They destroy your microbiome. Okay, they interfere with mitochondrial function, but and you have the chance of growing yeast and candida. Okay, so candida flourishes in your system. All right, and it creates this abnormal inflammatory environment, cutting down the oxygen to your tissues, because your body, because there's so much in inflammation and invasion that your body can't get oxygen. Well, your body needs the oxygen, right, to properly metabolize through the Krebs cycle of energy. And so once you do, an analysis of a person's existence since birth, or even, in utero, because now we see that people who in utero to 7 years, gabor mate, the more adverse life experiences you have, the higher risk of your diseases. So that's why we have to assess the trauma and drama in someone's life, because people have, they have adverse childhood experiences. They have the trauma and drama, just like I was telling you about the lady who came in with endometrial cancer. And so we have to unravel a person's life and existence to know where we need to focus on, and things start revealing when you start doing it, and then all the practitioners do their little magic on all the different facets, you see, and then the patient sees. Because like, I had a nurse come in last week and she's telling me her story, and she starts crying. She goes, wow, that's a lot. She didn't even realize what she's been through until she's seeing in front of me, and I'm unraveling to her life. And she's crying. She's only 30 something years old. And she realizes, wow, she says out loud, wow, that's a lot. So she's just realizing now. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and because we live unconsciously a lot of times. We're not conscious of what's going on, right? And so, and we all do it. We've all done it, because we, until something, crises happens, and we kind of go, oh, what's going on here? And then you reveal to yourself what's going on.
Yeah.
And so, and other people can help you reveal, but we also have to be open to the process too, because sometimes it's painful. and, and the reality sometimes is so like I just said, a wow, but we can turn that all into good. We can. And I always tell every patient that. I always say, look, this is a time for you to really get intimate with yourself, and to know yourself and understand yourself, and master the miracle that you get to live in every day, and then help someone else with everything that you've learned, because you really can't help somebody if you haven't been through it. And I'm not saying you have to go through everything in life, because that would not be good either. But, let's face it, if we've had and lived the problem, we tend to be good at helping others, right? Because we've been through it, like it's trying to explain to someone what it's like to have a child. Well, you can spend hours upon hours, but until you have it, that child, you don't know the miracle that's come into your life. So,
well, when someone's listening though, and they're just going, oh my gosh, where do you start? Like if someone's listening now and thinking, I need to prevent, and you've got a whole book that's very worth reading, but what's your top line? Like, because you can't do it all at once. Like, I've gone through a lot in it's been like 6 years since I had sort of the hit the wall life explosion, faced myself, and it's been 6 years, and I just went through menopause, and I feel like, so that I don't want to scare people. It's like, it's like you change slowly and all at once. You change you're even to hear you talk about EMFs, it's like, whoa, that's a huge thing to change. So anyway, that's a long-winded asking you where to start if you're like trauma. EMFs, toxins, et cetera, et cetera?
Right. Well, first of all, you need to educate yourself. Okay. And unfortunately, the education, it's not front and center. Okay. They don't put on the news. Oh, here, you need to get sunlight every day. Oh, you need to ground every day. Oh, EMFs are not good. No one tells you that. Okay. No one tells you the phone insert says that your phone is carcinogenic. No one tells you that a Tesla, if you drive it, look at the warnings on Tesla that these could be cancer causing. Okay. No one tells you that. You don't pay attention. Let's face it. Okay. Luckily at the gas station, they say if you're pregnant, this could be toxic, right? Thank goodness. Okay. But no one's alerting us to telling us because it's probably too scary. Okay. But people need to become educated and aware of what's going on with their life and what they need to do. And there are books, lots of books, my books, there's lots of books written on toxicity. There's books written on all kinds of things, but you've got to take charge of your own life. Okay. And you've got to learn. There's so many health podcasts now. There's so much out there to learn. So I would tell people to just start. I mean, there's my book has kind of an overview of a lot of things, right away. And then get another book, and they all kind of say similar things, right? And I always tell people, this is not something you're going to fix in a day, okay? And take your time. And I tell people, give yourself a year to kind of start getting yourself organized. Now, when patients with cancer, everything's an emergency. Why? Because you can't negotiate with cancer. And because cancer is it's already 10 years in the making. And so you're trying to get your body in order as quickly as possible, correct? And then you're getting biopsies, and then you're getting surgery, and then you may need chemo, and then, may need radiation. And so you have all this to deal with, okay? You've got to counterbalance all of those facets. And then you've got to change your life. And then I always tell people, you're going to be drinking out of a fire hose. That is for sure. But it is what it is. And we're going to help you. We're going to guide you through that process, but don't make it like it's okay. I got to do everything today, little by little. And I make it simple for patients. Maybe it starts with a detoxification and doing Epsom salt, baking soda, and clay baths. And then, I add the next thing and get rid of plastics out of your house, get an air purifier, make sure you have some kind of water purifier. These basic things. EMF is a whole nother thing. The best thing you could do is ground every day. That's the simplest, inexpensive thing to do. Do they have grounding mats? I didn't personally notice that much difference when I had a grounding sheet, but it may help some. Okay. Probably the best thing you can do though is connect with the earth and do that. And essential oils are very helpful for nurturing the body. Okay. So, because essential oils have a very, very high vibration. And so I think those can be very, very helpful with patients because they do have such a high vibrational frequency and different combos depending on what we're trying to treat and everything. But little by little, you have to get your sleep. Well, first of all, I tell people, you got to get your mental, emotional countenance in order. So we do something called EVOX. That is rapid. Vox is the Latin word for voice. And it reprograms. So when you start talking and your brain is programmed on the computer to say, it gives the person to look at that and say, okay, it sounds like you have had abandonment issues. And so they work through the different things that they see that are displayed on the brain. And the beauty of it, it's very quick. Okay. We don't have to do years of therapy. We do 5 to 10 sessions and patients are dramatically better. And we want the patient better, faster. And so, and I have used all kinds of techniques for the emotional countenance of someone. So we have found that to be the best and quickest, and people want to get better faster, right? And then, so I would say, and then we give all of our patients healing affirmations just to begin with, to start with, so they learn how to start talking to themselves, because we face it, we live in our subconscious, which started, in utero. And so we have all these subconscious recordings playing all the time, and they maybe are not serving us. So if we have conscious intentions about our life, then we're reprogramming ourselves, because our cells are listening to our thoughts 24/7. So if we do programmed intentions several times a day, we are reprogramming the thoughts that we had, right?
Did you know I also have a Substack? That's just a fancy way of saying I have a newsletter. But listen, it's not like every other newsletter. I am the only journalist in the world who's made menopause my beat. And each week I share research, news, products, tips, and tricks from the world of menopause and midlife. Sometimes I even write an essay. Hot Flash Inc. on Substack is where I pull together everything that's here and in the menosphere, and I break it down just for you, so that we can try and make sense of it all and figure out what to do together in real time. Join more than 5,000 women practitioners, CEOs, and more, and become a subscriber today. You can get my podcast as well as special video and audio drops you can't get anywhere else. Sign up today at hotflashinc.substack. Because people don't even know they're walking around with those thoughts. I mean, I didn't know that wasn't normal. Like I thought that was just everyone had just this horrible voice that was saying horrible things.
Yes. Yeah. And everybody
that can lead to cancer. Like that can actually, years of that can actually contribute with other factors.
Well, your body becomes what you think about most of the time.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you, happy people, do very, you can see the happiness factor, or the person who learns how to handle the curveballs. And the book, Viktor Frankl book, the famous book,
Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah, Man's Search for Meaning. If you read that book, I mean, it's probably one of the most well-read books, but it talks about between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space, there's time for growth and of you, and how your body's going, how you are going to respond to it. So, and we all have that plight every day. Okay. It's a 24/7 thing, right? It's not, but the more you practice it, the more you become, right? And so I never stop practicing it. Before I even get out of bed, the first thing I think about is affirmations, because I've been doing it so long. And when I'm driving, I don't listen to anything, and I'm doing affirmations. And when I'm with patients, I don't do affirmations, necessarily, because unless I have this outrageous case and I say, God, guide me in this case, because I get very difficult cases, and you've got to use the universe and its potential. I don't know if you know the book, The Field, written by Lynn McTaggart. But Lynn McTaggart wrote the book, The Field, and utilizing the quantum field to help you. And so we have to all use that. And she wrote a book on intention experiments and how intention really helped healing. And now she wrote the book, The Power of 8. She's the editor of What Your Doctor Doesn't Tell You. And she and her husband are author of that book. But anyway, but if you read that, we can all use the universe for healing. And so, but getting back to what you can do. So we have to sleep, because sleep is when the magic happens. And 50% of the population doesn't sleep, right? And then water, you have to have some kind of purification water system, because like in the state of California, now they're just taking sewage water and recycling it. And that's our water. So you must have like good water, because there's pharma in the water, there's chemicals in the water, there's insecticides in the water. I mean, hundreds of chemicals, there's heavy metals in the water. So you have to have a water purification, some kind of water purification. You need to eat foods that nourish and strengthen your body. So if you eat dead food and processed food and fast food, and which a lot of people do, and they are not cognizant of what they're putting in their mouth. To have energy, you have to eat energy. Okay. And so you've got to eat foods that are going to nourish and strengthen and heal your body, which is really an ancestral way of eating. Basically, eat how people ate, thousands of years ago, which they ate off the land. They hunted their animals and that good stuff. And they didn't eat things that are fake and chemical and, there's just too much chemicals in all these things and crazy fats and all kind of things. And then you got to move the 800 muscles in your body. So exercise is powerful to increase your oxygenation, increase your brain function, increase circulation, and increase the lymphatic system and all these great things. And people sit all day, they say sitting's the new smoking, right? Because people sit on a computer all day. And then so people need to move, and you need to incorporate movement as much as possible. And then there is, you've got to get outside. You've got to get outside and get sunshine, and you've got to get out in nature on a regular basis. And I would incorporate that you've got to cleanse some kind of cleansing on a regular basis. Okay. So that could be a bath detox. The easiest way to detox is probably Epsom salts, baking soda, clay. Okay. Not everybody has access to an infrared sauna. So I would say that if you can't do that, the other things I like orally to take is zeolite. Zeolite has been around for a long time, used in industry to detox major spills, etc. So zeolite's very easy to do. It comes in powders and pills and sprays, but that, and then there's another thing that I use called carbon 60, which is nano-sized charcoal and olive oil. So those two things, obviously food can be also purifying, but you've got to do some kind of detoxification, because what I see in the practice is people have lots of toxins and they have heavy metal. And one of the biggest toxins that people have is phthalates, and which are plastic. And, you're seeing it a lot in the news these days about plastics, and we're breathing them in, it's in the food, it's in the water. They say we eat a credit card of plastic a day. So those are big. So we do something called an environmental pollutant panel. And it tells you mold and metals and plastics and chemicals and insecticides, pesticides, glyphosate. So we do that because we know that glyphosate is cancer causing. We know plastics, predispose people to problems. The bottom line to cellular function is, what is your production of ATP? And your production of ATP is produced by the mitochondria. And the mitochondria are everyone knows is the powerhouse of the cell. So we have something in our body that happens called the cell danger response. And so the more things that we have our body being, invaded with, the more that cell danger response paralyzes and interferes with the function of the mitochondria. And so we have to get rid of the things that are interfering with the normal function of our body. Okay. And that's what we're living in today. We're disconnected humans, we're disconnected from nature, and we can't live, and we're living in the great poisoning. So we don't have a life that is creating the beautiful miracle that we need to be creating. And we can do that, but we all have to change. We all have to look at life differently.
I'm listening to you, and we talk a lot about menopause and perimenopause here, and women seem to be having a harder time. And there's people who talk about this sort of like evolutionary mismatch, like we're going through this while we're going through menopause and perimenopause, but the conversation is reduced to hormones a lot. And so I just wondered what you thought about that, because the conversation is obviously blown open. And I know you're a fan of taking hormones too, in a way. So I just kind of wanted to know what you think about this explosion of it's hormones, it's estrogen, it's, because we're hitting it in our 40s and late 30s when we've been living like this for a long time.
Right. Well, I would say, okay, first of all, you have to understand that I've lived a hormonal conundrum. And so the few things I've experienced, just so the listeners know that I come from not just the medical scientific aspect, but the actual living experience. So my mother took DES. And so we found out when I was a teenager. And so I started going to cancer institutions when I was 16, et cetera. And I never had 2 periods in a row in my life. Okay. So the answer to all of that, well, 1, you're young. Then 2, let's go on birth control, which changed me forever, which is terrible. I had a permanent change when I went on birth control, okay, in my whole system. Anyway, but back then, that's what they thought was the answer. And, if you read the pill problem and the bitter pill and all these, there's a lot to birth control pills, okay, a lot that they don't tell you. And then anytime I mention it, people, OB-GYNs freak out and everything. But I do believe that you have a duty. If you're going to give a patient a birth control, you have a duty to let them know so they make the educated decision, not the ignorant decision.
Just on that point, it does seem strange to me. I'm not a medical person, and I've talked to some people behind the scenes that it's perfectly fine to go on the pill and remove all your natural hormones and your natural ovulation process. But then all of a sudden, when you hit menopause, you have to replace the natural hormones that you're losing. That
Right.
part seems very confusing to me.
Right. Well, it is. And I know if you're 21 years of age and you're worried about getting pregnant, the pill is the easy fix, right? Okay. But if you give a patient a pill, you need to give them, okay, here's all the things you need to do if you take the birth control pill. And also you need to know you have to give patients informed information, right? But people need to understand, and because your doctors don't tell you, okay, they just give it out, okay? But they're synthetic estrogen, progesterone, they're turning off your system, okay? So you basically don't have good hormones, okay? So then when I needed to get pregnant, I didn't ovulate, right? So I had to go through, and I was one day, all of a sudden, wake up, I'm dying to have a baby. Like literally, it was the craziest possession, and one of the craziest ones I had in my life. Because I never thought about kids going through, I think, going to college, going to medical school, now you got to do this and so forth. And then one day I just have to have a baby. And so I talked to my girlfriend who was an OBGYN, and she goes, oh, you need to take Clomid because Clomid's going to help you get pregnant. And I go, okay. I took that. Well, unfortunately, taking Clomid I didn't ovulate. I'm doing those ovulation kit tests every day. Anyway, to make a long story short, I go to infertility doctors and I do successfully. I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version, but I successfully, had 3 kids with, medical intervention. Okay. And I'm shortcutting it because there was a lot to it. Okay. And then when I delivered twins 29 years ago, I had emergency C-section without anesthesia. So that shut down my pituitary. And your pituitary, if anyone knows, is your master gland that controls all your hormones. And I ended up getting a pituitary transplant, not in the United States, somewhere else. That pituitary transplant saved my life and turned my endocrine system back on. So I not only have had menopause, I've also had complete, malfunctioning of my pituitary. And so I will tell everyone out there that hormones are the most important chemical messengers in your body. They are what keeps you alive. All right. And no one should ever underestimate and tell you that hormones are no big deal, because they are your biggest deal. They help you make the decisions every single minute of your life, your thoughts, your energy, your stamina, your well-being. I mean, your every single thing, how your heart works, your liver works, everything works. Okay. How your memory works, like every single thing. And no one should ever underestimate and simplify the hormonal orchestra that takes place in your body each and every day. Okay. I am now 66 and I do take hormones every day. If I didn't take hormones, I wouldn't be able to work and function. And women need to understand, because there's always all this information about hormones predispose you to cancer and so forth. But that has been disproven. But hormones enhance your living each and every day, enhance your longevity, period, end of story. And so they had the Women's Health Institute in 2002 because they were using a conjugated Premarin hormone, which is made from horse urine. And they were using that alone, and those women did very well. And the women who took progesterone, the synthetic progesterone, medroxyprogesterone, those patients got increased risk of cancer because they were using a synthetic progesterone. And so that's all been debunked. And now we know that women's life and longevity is much better with or without cancer. Now, there's a whole other thing of estrogens and cancer, meaning women who've had breast cancer. That's a whole nother conundrum. And I always tell patients, we've got to look at everybody individually. So if you're 30 years old and you have ER positive breast cancer, we just got to do everything to save your life. Okay. And so I may temporarily shut down your hormones because that is just one of the 100 things that are contributing. But if you take an older woman, you trade one problem for another problem, because estrogen helps your hippocampus, your brain, your memory, your heart, your bones, your skin, your mental, emotional outlook. But you can't just look at estrogen. You've got to look at all the hormones. So women have 4 different hormonal systems. They have the thyroid, which is the battery to your body and the central part of the hormonal orchestra. Then you have your pancreas, which makes insulin glucagon, which is also influenced by your hormones. Then you have your ovaries that make estrogens and progesterone and testosterone. Then you have your adrenal glands that make DHEA and cortisol and 98 other hormones that we haven't even discovered yet. And so this is an entire hormonal orchestra. And then you have pregnenolone, which is the grandmother of all the hormones. And so you need some concoction cocktail of all that. And again, everyone is different. And again, if you have a history of breast cancer, you're in a category. And then if you haven't had a history of breast cancer, or then I do another program. Okay. But my job is to protect the patient but also make them feel good and have a great life. And then, like, if a patient has had breast cancer, I'll make sure that everything is perfect. Like if I have a 70-year-old, that woman wants a little bit of estrogen. But a lot of times you can give a woman DHEA and pregnenolone and fix their adrenals and help them make them a good, hormonal chemistry. And so, but again, you've got to take each individual patient. That's what's wrong with medicine, is one size fits all. You're on a robotic conveyor belt and everybody gets the same thing. Well, that's impossible. There's no one thing for everybody. Okay. And so you got to figure out what works for each patient in every person's scenario and so forth and so on. And so, but hormones are the most vital chemical messengers that your body needs to work every single day. And there's not just hormones for the breast or the uterus. They affect the brain. They affect every single side. So you have a cell, and every cell has over 30,000 receptor sites for all of these things I'm talking about. All right. And so that's why you have to have a good membrane, which gets gummed up with phthalates and all other kind of chemicals. They interfere with, they get on that membrane and they interfere with your normal biochemistry. That's why it's very important for us to have the proper oils in our body, so we have a good magical membrane, so those receptor sites are working.
Okay. Oils, you mean eating good fats?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so I've heard you speak about, okay, so you're not concerned about hormone. People are always like, well, I get cancer if I take hormone therapy. And what I'm hearing you say is like, it has such a small factor. If it was a factor, it's one of so many, many things.
Well, I would say that 90% of patients who have breast cancer have never taken hormones.
Okay. Like,
and the studies worldwide, like if you look at the countries like Finland, Denmark, Spain, Italy, they give it to women free.
Yeah.
And so that is a part of their system, and because they know it enhances their quality of life and longevity.
Okay.
And they've done the study. So here, there's just complete, total misinformation, unfortunately. And so I know because we've been unfortunately fighting this for a very long time. And, fortunately, I found progesterone very early in my life, which saved my life early on in my, 30s. And so it's the balance of hormones, because like the lady I just had endometrial cancer, she never took hormones. She has endometrial cancer.
Right.
She never took hormones. Okay. And all the women, the 30-year-olds, give or take, that I take, other than taking, some took birth control pills, they've never taken hormones, and they have breast cancer.
Mhm.
So, and then did God give you a body to self-destruct? No. Okay. It did not give all these hormones for your body to self-destruct. There are extenuating factors that are causing the increase in breast cancer. And we got to look at all the causes that women are, and we need to be on a preventive, very proactive, precise trajectory of preventing cancer and making people aware. And they've got to change their way of living. We have to. And it's for all of us.
And do you think being on hormone therapy can prevent cancer? I mean, there are some studies that are showing.
Yeah, there are lots of studies that are showing that if you go on hormone therapy, your quality of life is better, and your risk of prevention is better. Like, for especially if you take progesterone, because progesterone is anti-cancer. Okay, in all of its ways, it's anti-cancer. And that's the perfect balancing for when you have estrogens, is you have progesterone to balance it out. And then you talk about testosterone. Testosterone is protective against breast cancer, and it helps, your muscles, your contractility of your heart, and your immune. I mean, testosterone is a big part of your immune system, just like DHEA. DHEA is very protective for your immune system and longevity. I mean, these studies are profound in that way.
You've also spoken about
the women. We'll talk about mortality. Breast women who've taken hormones, their mortality is less with the women who have taken hormones.
if they get breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I've heard you speak about estrogen and the commercially produced patches and gels, and then bioidentical, which you can have different kinds of estrogen. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Right. Okay. So there's biologically identical hormones, which are exact replicas of your normal physiological hormones. Okay. And so we know that a combination of estradiol and estriol, which is protective against breast cancer, and the best way to do it is topical. Okay. Because you're bypassing the liver. And the studies show that it is better topical than it is taking it orally. And then you must combine it with progesterone, because estrogen and progesterone are balancers. Okay. Then, of course, I check people's testosterone level, and I also make sure that then I check their DHEA sulfate. I also check their pregnenolone and all the other things to fortify their system. So there is an estradiol pill that is sold, commercially. There is an estradiol patch you mentioned, which is biologically identical, and which is not, but if you take the transdermal patch, you need to balance it with progesterone and check levels to make sure that they are in proper, balance and opposition.
And with that patch or gel, you're not getting estriol.
No, exactly. So you should be getting the both. I like to use 50% estradiol with 50% estriol, because what you're doing is you're mimicking the body's physiology, right? And so, because your other hormone that you make is estrone. Now there are other estrogens, also made, But the main ones, when you look about replacement, should be a little bit of E3 and half and half, E3 and E2, which is estriol and estradiol.
But top line, progesterone and estrogen and testosterone if you need
exactly,
it. Okay.
Correct.
But progesterone is the big one because it seems to me when I read studies that researchers are still not separating out synthetic and bio.
That is correct.
What's the point of all this research? Because we're getting findings and they're all just, to me, they're just all over the place. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that. And they're putting them all together and they shouldn't be,
That's going to take some time.
Yeah, you have to qualify the study and say, make sure that they are biologically identical.
Yeah, it's still not happening. It's crazy. There was that one about rheumatoid arthritis and it just, you look in the study.
All together.
Yeah. Okay, well, I've taken enough of your time. You're a busy woman. You have to go. Thank you so much. That was just a really good education. I really appreciate it. And you're doing great work.
Well, I appreciate your work, and we've got to work together to spread the message.
Yeah.
Hot Flash Inc. was created and is hosted by Ann Marie McQueen, produced and edited by Sonia Mack. The information contained in this podcast is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products referenced on the podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the products. Information received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem, i.e. menopause or anything else, or any healthcare questions, please promptly see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Ann Marie McQueen and any producers or editors, disclaim any responsibility from any possible adverse effects from the use of any information contained herein. Opinions of guests on this podcast are their own, and the podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about a guest's qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. This podcast is owned by Hot Flash Inc. Media.